It has been said that the universe itself is kind of the sum total of everything that can be known or is possible. It's infinite potential to be or infinite potential to not be. In kind of some of these ancient esoteric systems, it's kind of represented that way. That's kind of the cosmos. It's infinite potential to be, and in any infinite potential to be, there's a certain amount of non-being, because matter is simply consciousness that has gone to sleep and basically, congealed or gelled itself. And in this, there is a little bit of consciousness, because nothing can be completely non-existent. There is no such thing as non-being. So if a consciousness could embrace this, consciousness outside of it, or even inside of it, then you would have all knowledge, you would know everything that was going on anywhere at any time, and you would be in kind of a really superior state of being, right? Well, obviously, none of us is there. However, the idea is that each one of us has inside us, or we are essentially a souled being, or a potentially souled being, and that part of us that is souled or potentially souled is a part of this greater consciousness. And you can connect with it, and in a certain sense, the communication with the seas is like that. It's like, after you've peeled away all the layers of yourself, your own programs, all the barriers to, your deep inner consciousness, and you've accessed that part then also can connect with the inner consciousness, or the higher consciousness, or the cosmic consciousness, or the Akashic records, whatever kind of term you want to call it, the archetypal consciousness, you want to go Jungian on it. And it can connect with that, and it can access information. In one of the previous videos I made the remark about my friend who was dying right at the time, and I misnamed it. I call it the Christchurch mass shooting. It wasn't. It was Port Arthur, Tasmania, not Christchurch, New Zealand. But it was right at the time of the Port Arthur, Tasmania shooting that she had died. And so I was having this conversation with her, and that was when she said, "Oh no, don't shoot the little girl." And then I asked, "What were you talking about?" And she said, "You'll find out tomorrow." And that's when we found out about this mass shooting. And I don't think I really said very much about what a bizarre kind of reality it must be to be in that state where you can be having a conversation with me, more or less, sitting in my little office next door to my kitchen in my house in Newport Richey, Florida, while also being aware of a mass shooting that's taking place on the other side, not only to the other side of the planet, but the other hemisphere of the planet, down in the southern hemisphere. What kind of a bizarre reality is that? I mean, that's kind of weird. It's more than just, it's not like she could visually see through the planet. There's something else there. And this is one of the reasons why I keep saying that exploring these kinds of realities, because to my way of thinking, that incident right there, among many others, but that one in particular, that she was able to see from our space-time location, Newport Richey, Florida, on such and such a day at such and such a time, something that was taking place on the other side of the planet, bespeaks a reality that really needs exploration by people qualified to do it. And by qualified, I'm not necessarily saying that you have to have all the degrees and all that sort of thing, but one of the things about research is, any kind of research, whether it's historical research, archaeology, engineering, physics, mathematics, whatever, one of the things that you like to have, or you need to have, is a certain control over your material. You have to have what they call controls. You have to have standards, yardsticks against which you measure things so that you can at least have some idea whether you're dealing with something that's this kind of phenomenon or this kind of phenomenon. And in a certain sense, these controls that I'm talking about are kind of like differential diagnosis in spirit release therapy. You ask certain questions, you query the information. If it's historical information, you query it. The historian said, such and such a battle was fought on such and such a day, and these guys were the generals, and this many people died. The archaeology, on the other hand, says something different, and the epigraphic evidence says something still different. The historian says a battle was here, but you find the guy's tomb, and engraved on his tomb, and this is an actual case I'm reciting here, and on the guy's tomb, it was listed where he had fought battles and who he had prevailed against, and it had nothing to do with what was in the written history that was written some 200-300 years later. So the historian, you query that information, and then you have something to compare it to, and you realize the historian is lying to you, but then you want to query it in another way. Why is he lying? Okay, then you find out that during the period of history, or period of time when he was writing that history, there was a political reason for him to glorify this other person in such and such a way, and to include the names of certain peoples who were defeated and dominated at the time. And it just happened at that particular time in battle, just kind of fitted the need, because then it made it look like once they had been dominated and subjugated, that for them to do something in this later period of time would have been unthinkable or unconscionable or in some way, a bad thing. So he was rewriting past history to make something usable for his current history. And the problem is that most history is written that way. And that's why, historians, biblical historians, any kind of history, any kind of archaeology, you need controls. And these kind of things, require that in order for you to find out what is or is not the truth. So, getting back to our really strange reality, where my friend, and I was convinced it was my friend because of the personality that came through in the responses. This is a session I haven't published because it was kind of personal, but there are other sessions where I've communicated with departed individuals that I wish to communicate with that I don't publish because they're personal. But in any event, what a strange reality that is. And the only thing that I can think of that possibly explains it is that part of us, that deep unconscious part that is connected to that information field, is far more interesting than any of us can imagine. And this is where you start talking about information theory, and I'm not going to go into it in any great detail, but one of the old questions people used to ask, if a tree falls in the forest, and if there's nobody there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, when you start considering information theory, you ask the question a different way. It depends on how you define sound. If you define sound as, the impact of compressed waves in an atmosphere made by the falling on the tree on a human eardrum, you have to be very, very specific. If that's what you're defining as sound, then if there's no human available, no, it's not making a sound. However, sound is not really that tightly defined. Sound is fairly simply, compression waves in an atmosphere that move. So whether there is anybody there to hear them or not, they still exist. So yes, the tree does make a sound. And by the same token, if you have a book, do we have a book in here? Hand me a book. That book doesn't have words in it. That book has no information. Hand me that book. That's a good book. Okay. I like visual aids. I'm simple-minded sometimes. Here we have a book. This book has lots of words in it. Now, just suppose all of these words were in a language that I didn't understand, as it turns out. A lot of it's in English, a lot of it's in French. Do you think that the fact that I couldn't read it would mean that it didn't have information in it? No. It would still have information, even if I couldn't read it. And you know what? If this book were buried in the ground and dug up 20,000 years from now by some future archaeologist and nobody could decipher what it said, it would still have the same information in it that's in there. And it's a lot of information. So the point is that information exists even without there being a decoder. But that brings us to the point that for information to exist, you have the information, you have a storage device, words in a book. Okay, storage or words in a book could also be something that transmits it. You know? For example, if you have a telephone. You know, I was going to draw a telephone like this. Would any of you have known that that was a telephone? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Only because you watched old movies. Okay? Nowadays, the telephone is like this. Huh? Okay, if I'm going to call somebody on the telephone, let's take the old-fashioned one, because that's simpler for me. I'm going to call somebody on the telephone. So I've got the telephone here, and I pick it up, and there's something in my head. And I want to pick this telephone up and talk to somebody. So I pick the telephone up and I dial the number. I emit the sounds, which is a way of conveying information, into the telephone. The telephone then converts them into an electronic signal. And then somebody over here, well, in this case, they're going to pick up with their cell phone. I'm old-fashioned, and the person I'm calling has a cell phone. They're modern. So they pick it up, and the cell phone decodes those electronic signals, conveying that information, and turns them back into sounds that are similar to the sounds, or, you know, that reproduce the sounds that I made. Speaking in, you know, reproduces what I said. Reproduces what I said. So that the person probably can even recognize my voice. You know, the timbre of my voice, or the tone, or that I'm angry, or that I'm happy, or that I'm excited, or whatever. And then that information goes into their ear, conveyed by my words, and becomes information in their head. And they may then choose to do something based on what I've just told them. The cake arrived. Come on over. We're going to have it in half an hour. Bring the ice cream. Sorry. How about the steak and the bacon? Yeah. Anyway, so this person who's picked this up got this information. This information made a change in them, in some sense. That it was like, you know, I have information. I can make a choice. I can either say, yes, I'm on my way, or, oh, I fell down the stairs today and broke my leg. There's no way I can drive. Can you bring the cake to me? Okay? So you can see this information idea is a lot more interesting than one might originally suppose. Not only can you store information in a book, you can store information in electronic devices, you can transmit it, you can change it, you can code it, you can decode it, and interestingly, it still is information. But then what happens when information becomes part of you? And I'm not going to go off into a whole bunch of other stuff about, heat is information, but, just mention that in passing. If you, my cigarette, you see, I just added information to it. I just told it to burn. I added heat, fire. It's ignited, it's burning. Heat is a form of information. If you heat a pot of water, you're adding something into that water and making it do something, boil. That's a form of mechanical information that's added to a mechanical or more or less mechanical device. But it's far more interesting when we're talking about information in terms of human beings and transmitting information that is completely abstract, storing human information in computers, information in DNA. I mean, there's incredible amounts of information in your DNA because somehow certain processes trigger the DNA to, unwrap itself under certain circumstances in certain places. The ribosome reads a piece of code and manufactures a protein that's needed at that moment for some reason in one particular cell of the billions of cells in your body, produces that particular protein, which then triggers a cascade of response. Maybe all the other cells start doing something, so they're all busy. But they're passing all this information around. And all kinds of things. And maybe it's because there's a virus that's invaded. And you have a little combination here because one of the responses is, oops, up with the temperature. Ward off the invader. Okay. But the important thing I want to talk about here, rather than going off into that, is the idea of information enabling you to make decisions. And let's not forget decoders. Because information is no good without a decoder. It's not just transmission because, we have this DNA, there's ribosomes in the body that can decode for certain purposes, but we cannot yet really actually read the DNA completely. Oh, they've sequenced the genome, they know a few things about it, but there is so much DNA. I mean, for all we know, there is a literal written message in our DNA that comes from a non-material realm from which ours receives its existence, that tells us all the secrets of the universe if we could just figure out how to read it. We don't know. Anyhow, I have this cute little graphic here. You have a person, because information is really kind of involved with the many worlds theory. Because you have a person here. Can everybody kind of see this? You've got this person here, and he starts here and he goes to there, and there is a crossroads. Now he makes a decision. He's either going to get married or he's not. Okay, so he doesn't get married in this timeline here, but you see how this timeline becomes shadowy. See? He doesn't get married in this one. He goes off and lives alone, or he goes off and he becomes a bum in this one because you see him wearing his hoodie and kind of slouching along. Here he's carrying a briefcase, so in this timeline he became a solitary businessman, like a billionaire or something. He was going out there and raping and pillaging on Wall Street. But then he decided not to do that. So those are kind of shadowy outcomes. But what he did decide to do was get married. So here he's walking hand in hand with his sweetheart in this timeline. Well, there's another crossroads here. In this one, his sweetheart dies, or he goes wacko and murders her. It's hard to tell from the image there. But No, that one doesn't happen. Instead, they have two little children. They walk off into the sunset living happily ever after in this one. Okay? So that's, what really one of the simplest versions of many worlds, which is that you make a choice and it's like a tree. And when you have a tree, a tree, kind of grows like that. And for some reason or another, if anybody pays attention to trees, you know that in the natural course of things, sometimes it'll grow this way, it'll branch off that way, and it'll have this branch too, but for some reason this one will die. And then this one will continue and branch off this way, and this one has two or three. This one dies, and then this one dies, and then that one goes on. So there are points where, the life force continues, and there are points where, it doesn't continue for some reason. There is a decision made for some reason by the tree to support this branch or this twig and not that branch or that twig. Sometimes those decisions are made because of external elements. Sometimes those decisions are made by people with a chainsaw and a pair of snippers. They decide for the tree which branch is going to live and which one isn't. For all we know, there are beings in our cosmos who decide when and if we need to be pruned as a species, because each of us individually is just kind of like a cell in the tree. Okay? Here is another example of the way this kind of works. You have these possibilities, and there actually exists these infinite possibilities across here, right? And you can actually, I think that the way to look at this would really be like this, because you start out here, and there's this, these different possibilities. You do several different things, and then this one gets the most juice, the most energy. So that one is the one that goes along. So maybe it's a question of the focus of consciousness, where you focus your consciousness. Which branch of the reality of your potential life experiences. And these are, potentials are infinite. I mean, this just shows a couple. But they really are kind of infinite, and at certain points, you can make certain decisions based on the information you have at the moment for one of these. And it's not necessarily, as we were discussing last night, that there's a pre-planned crossroads in your life where, it's been pre-planned between you and this person here that you're going to meet at such and such a time. I think that may be putting a little too much predestination into the matter, because, people this person here and this person here could be born on completely different sides of the planet. And it could depend entirely, maybe they didn't plan anything when they decided to be born. It's all a matter of choices and collinearity and moving into congruence with one another along a particular information path, rather than some kind of pre-planned thing. Look at this one. This is like a little snapshot of a series of worlds. Say these are all different realities. Okay? And they're adjacent, and say these are just moving down. Every instant the universe recreates itself. Now this one is one where they're talking about wormholes in our universe, but I think it's actually more useful for other reasons than that. Because if you think about it, each one of us being a wave-reading consciousness unit could be represented by one of these little circles here. And he's got them connected with these little passageways, kind of like wormholes. But I would say that our realities actually overlap in a slightly different way. That, here's my reality. Here's my husband's reality. here's our children's realities. See? And then he's got colleagues that he knows that I don't know, have never met. I've got old friends that I know that he's never met. You see, but they kind of overlap. Maybe it's okay to represent it with these little wormhole connections, but I kind of think about them as overlapping. And then there's other situations, where you have a big circle where you have everybody inside it. Here's say this is our human civilization, and these are different realities. Maybe there's a billion of these little circles inside the big circle, and then there's other circles of the population of psychopaths, and then another circle of population of normal people, population of different kinds of psychological anomalies. So they're circles within circles within circles. But the bottom line, the thing I want to emphasize is that each one of our realities, our personal realities, is kind of a realm in and of itself. And we could be connected as this image. This is, they want to talk about wormholes, but I'm not. For all we know, our connections with other people are kind of like wormholes, that we can move in and out of those realities, through kind of wormholes. I mean, what does a wormhole really feel like? Nobody knows. Perhaps when you really are in tune with another person, your partner, your baby, your close friend, whatever, maybe there's kind of like a wormhole activated, and there's all kinds of exchanges going on between the two of you at your deeper wave-reading consciousness unit level that you're not even aware of. So I want to come back to this particular image. I mean, if we know that there's infinite numbers of possible realities you can move to, and that maybe as your consciousness selects different ones, the other ones die off or dissipate or fade away. And keeping this in mind also, that this could be an even larger reality, such as what we have here, where you have a global reality with different populations of individuals in sub-realities and sub-sub-realities and sub-sub-sub-sub-realities, and so on. Let's imagine that right at this moment, there's a whole bunch of overlapping worlds, and these are planet Earths. And as you probably are aware, apparently most of the people on planet Earth don't really seem to be able to do much about the state of the planet, the global destruction that's taking place because of greed and big pharma and big agri and big corporations and wars and depleted uranium and nuclear power plants and garbage in the oceans. I don't know if any of you have been paying attention to these things, but it's really, really bad. And I don't see that there is much possibility for a good outcome on this world we're on right here, where we've got all of those conditions prevailing. I don't know about you, but as a person who's spent most of their life studying and analyzing history, any time there has been a pathological rulership, the only way it really changes is when another group of pathologicals comes along and they start having a war with each other, and then they use propaganda to move populations against one another, and one or the other may or may not get destroyed. What usually happens is, in any kind of situation where people are getting to that point where they're really destroying their environment, and it's happened before, somehow the cosmos doesn't like that, and it sends a flaming comet, or a bunch of them, a bunch of small ones, maybe a big one, whatever, and kaboom, everybody gets knocked back to the Stone Age where, not only is the population seriously decimated, but the potentials for technological destruction are also decimated. It stirs up the environment. It brings new chemical elements to the planet, new minerals. It creates storms. It redistributes the minerals on the land surface. There's volcanoes. There's rains. There's, all kinds of things happen that just kind of stir the planet up in some really violent ways. Most creatures, including humans, don't survive that sort of thing, but it's actually very good for the planet. It's like rolfing for the planet when something like this happens. The planet really likes it. It really feels better afterwards, and it's rid of all those parasites. Okay? So, but even if this doesn't happen, which, what else do you imagine happening? Think about it, really think about the way things are. Do you actually honestly think that if you sit there and meditate on world peace, that a psychopath is going to suddenly acquire a soul and change his ways? How do you picture that happening? People have been having world peace days since the 70s, and everything's just gotten worse. So I don't know about you, but from where I sit or stand at the moment, it doesn't look like it's a very positive activity, and it's just getting worse and worse. Now we have, it used to be you didn't have to lock your door. It used to be that you could walk up to a policeman and ask him to help you, and he was actually there to help you. He was your neighbor. You knew who he was. Nowadays, policemen look like, what are those soldiers in Star Wars? Stormtroopers. They look like stormtroopers in Star Wars, and they carry stun guns. And they stun people, and they stun innocent people, and they just stun disabled people. They stun children. They are arresting children in schools. They put handcuffs on 6-year-olds, for not being able to sit still in their seat. Maybe it's a little worse than that, but essentially, and they're putting people in charge of schools who have no business working with children. The destruction of our society, the degradation of our society, the increasing disparity between the rich and the poor, this huge chasm. And there are plenty of places where you can go and see that, the richest 1% have this much money and everybody else has like this much. This is 99% here, and this is 1%. And most of these, they don't even register. Okay? Where do you think it's going to go, honestly? At the very least, there's going to be a lot of starvation very, very soon. And a lot of people are going to be dying because whatever food the planet is able to produce under the present climatary change conditions, the rich people are going to get it. The people with power, the people with armies. And as what's his name in the movie V for Vendetta says, what happens when people without guns come up against people with guns? Usually the people without guns end up dead. So I don't know what your vision for the future is and what your delusion is if you think that you can just meditate on world peace and get there. It looks to me like, we're kind of at this point here, and this choice is being made, to becoming a bum. Or maybe it's at this point here where he murders his wife. Who knows? Things are not good. And what's going to happen is that human consciousness, if it gets really wiped out on this planet from starvation, from earthquakes, tsunamis, from disease, probably our biggest problem facing us is disease. Some kind of black death, with an 80% mortality rate. Our planet is not going to fare very well. So here we all are. How do you do anything? I mean, if meditating on world peace doesn't do it, what does do it? What can work? If anything. Is there anything? Well, maybe this world over here has a different outcome of these potential worlds. Maybe this one has a sunny future. Like that sun? But how do you get from this world to this one? Is it even possible? And if you did, how would you notice it? I mean, some people think that all they have to do is just think nice thoughts and be a good boy, and one day, something is going to happen from outside the world, and it's going to translate it, change the energies. Everybody's going to be uplifted into, some other dimension of reality just automatically. But what if it doesn't work that way? What if what really works is this? Or this? Or this? What if some of the laws of physics, or the properties of physics, let me say, because I'm not sure we really know what the laws are. I mean, we know certain laws. We have theorems, we have postulates, we have lemmas, we have axioms. We have all of those things, and things seem to work pretty well, and they seem to be pretty well defined, and it's pretty interesting, and we have some control over it, the way we have some control over historical research. So let's go with what we've got a probability on, okay? And let's assume that it is like this. And it's not just a question of whether or not you just drift along. I mean, this guy here, he had a choice to make. He could get married, or he could live alone. It's a really simple, basic choice. Okay, once he made the choice to live alone here, not get married, then he had another choice. He could just go off and be a bum on Skid Row and drink his life away. I should have put a bottle in his hand here. Or he could get his briefcase and he could become a day trader on Wall Street and, become a real marauder. But he didn't choose that. So over here, he chose to get married. He then had another choice. He could murder his wife, or she died of some disease, or they had children, lived happily ever after. But each one of these is a choice, and each choice is based on information, the information available to you. Now, if this person here, if he'd known that at this choice, he was going to become, a lonely Skid Row bum in the streets in the future because he made some stupid choice, he didn't stop drinking, do you think he would have stopped drinking? Or if he went here and he knew that if they kept arguing and didn't get counseling, that he was going to end up killing his wife? Or if he didn't pay attention to her symptoms that she was complaining about and get her to a doctor, she was going to, he's going to come home and find her dead one day? If he'd had that information, you see how the information can make a difference in each of these situations? These are just kind of simple bits of information. So I'm talking about here information of that sort, but bigger. Information about yourself, your frequency, other people, information about how to move from this reality to this one. How do you do that? Is it even possible? Well, let me give you a little personal example. 25 years ago, I was a housewife in Florida. I had 5 children. I had an autoimmune condition, and I was really sick, and I was probably going to be dead in another 5 or 6 years. And I was living in an unhappy marriage. I mean, I wasn't beaten or abused or anything, but it was psychologically unhappy, just 2 completely different people. I mean, I was married to a religious fanatic who wanted to take the kids to the Baptist church and scare them to death of hell and damnation. Me, on the other hand, I wanted to know how the universe really worked, and I didn't quite believe this Jehovah guy and his claims to have created it and know how things worked. And I really didn't think that having faith in him was going to do much for me or my kids. So I made some choices. And after I made some choices to do research, to study, then I made choices to engage in an experiment based on the knowledge I had acquired from doing hypnotherapy, spirit release, all the studies and research I'd done in the paranormal, channeling, that sort of thing. And then I made the choice to do it a certain way rather than be swayed by, the cheap and easy solutions. I worked out the theory based on all this information that I could gather. And then once I'd worked out the theory, then I kind of stuck to my plan, to do it a certain way. I think it's quite possible, and it's highly probable, that I did finally clear away a whole bunch of my own personality stuff that was inside in the way, and did get into touch with this information field that I can be in touch with myself from within. Although I'm sure that the transmission line is not perfect. There's still, maybe sometimes there's a little static on the line. But, I called up the information field and said, and I figured out how to, what the number was, and I, figured out how to build the communication line, how to, get these things coded properly and do this stuff so that I could call up that information field and get an answer, get some information that comes back, and then how to decode it. How to decode it is an interesting process itself, because it's not as simple as you might think, because you have a certain, say you're getting something from a language that is so far beyond anything you understand, and it has to be transduced down into my English. Okay, well, maybe it's kind of hard to translate cosmic concepts into English, but we do the best we can, and it seems to be an interesting experiment. So anyway, I did that. I was making choices all along the way, and then at a certain point I made a choice to live in truth. I didn't want to live in a relationship that was not, at least my personal relationship. I mean, I understood that I could have friends that I could talk to a little bit this way, a little bit that way with another friend, so on and so forth. But I didn't want my personal, intimate relationships to be one where I had to pretend or lie, because I understood that when you live that way, that, you feel like everybody here feels. I'm not with my own kind. I want to be with somebody I can talk to. I want to be with somebody who understands what I'm talking about, who feels similarly to what I feel, because then you kind of lessen the problematical issues between giving information and to somebody else who is then able or not to decode it. Can they decode it? So I made that decision. That was like, one of these decision points here. I mean, my little drawing would be quite different, because I had these children attached to me, and I was basically choosing to go off this way, me and the kids. And shortly thereafter, within about a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months. Okay, within 3 months, I met my current husband. Now, an interesting thing my husband said to me after we got married was, he said, I had the feeling, or every once in a while I get this funny feeling that you created me, or I created you, and we both exist only because of these choices that were made. And that when you move from one reality to another, because I ended up on a completely different world. When I made the decision to start the Seas experiment, I moved over to this world here. It was slightly adjacent, there was an overlap. Then when I made the decision to change the way my life was structured, which is what it really amounts to. I mean, it's not like people have to get divorced or something like that. That's not the point. The point is how your life is structured. If you don't necessarily talk to your wife or your husband all the time in the most, honest and intimate details, if they are not able to decode you, if you don't really share information via a wormhole like this, if it's okay with you, that's fine. It's okay. But anyway, when I decided to restructure my life, I moved to this world. Then, when I decided to marry my present husband, I moved to this world. And maybe this is the world, the potential world that he was on, that was recreating itself every moment, in this straight line, right? So my world, where I started out over here, suddenly it came into conjunction with his, and then he felt like he was a completely new person with a whole new past and future, because before this connection was made, this was just a ghost possibility. Like these. Okay? Well, time went by and we did certain things. We decided to put our material on the website. That moved us to another world. We decided to remain firm when we came under attack instead of folding and just going away, packing up our tent and going home. That moved us to still another world. Every time we came to a decision, we were here and we had, or however many possibilities, we picked one. We'd go one way and then another. So you see, what the point I'm trying to make is with each of these decisions, it was based on information we could gather. Each one took us to another world, another reality. And then what I've noticed now, for the past 10 years or so, and even this police investigation that we underwent and this fiscal audit, which we successfully navigated, and getting to the point where we are now, with, pretty much complete legal protection, a team of lawyers looks out for us, not bad. Starting out as a woman with a hobby, 5 kids, and a dog and a cat. It's a different reality for me. It's completely different. Because I made these decisions. And I made these choices, and other people have made these choices. Every one of you here in this room has made choices that leads you to where you are at this moment in time. You're here, not somewhere else. Okay? And you make these decisions based on the best information you have. Now, one of the decisions, I'll give you an example. When we had this police investigation started, because this complete nut job, decided that his wife or his partner who wanted to restructure her life wasn't to be allowed to do that. And therefore, he had to accuse us of influencing a weak-minded person, which was as far from the truth as anything could possibly be. But anyway, this somewhat medieval legal system in France pursues such claims. I suppose if you had enough money to pay a lawyer in the U.S., they would pursue a similar claim there through the courts, but here it's just kind of automatic. You go to the police and you say, somebody influenced my girlfriend to want to leave me and she doesn't like me anymore, and you got to go fix it. You got to kill those people and then make her love me again. That's what he was basically saying. And never mind that he was a pervert, and I'm not going to say anything else. Anyway, we made the decision at that time that instead of folding up our tents and going home. And there have been 100 times throughout this whole process for the last 10, 15 years where we could have folded up our tents and have said, to heck with this. Who needs this kind of hassle? I mean, it has been an enormous hassle for years, dealing with just absolute unbelievable assaults and attack and defamation and libel and slander and plagiarism and everything you could imagine. But every time for me it has been okay, well, this is the truth and that is a lie. Let me learn enough to navigate. And in this case, it was a question of getting the right lawyer. And the lawyer informs you of the law. And once you know the law, you know your position better, and then you can make your choices better, either go this way or go that way. So we did that. So as a consequence, we are now in a much better position. We also have this big website, sot.net, where we gather information about the whole planet all the time. We're continuously scanning the information about the planet. Because at some point in time, we may pick up that one little piece of information that's going to tell us it's time to do something this way or that way. Maybe it's time to shut down our website. Maybe it's time to move to Siberia. Maybe it's time to, run for president. Who knows? But each decision has taken us to a different reality. Now, what we think at this point is that when a group of people gathers together and they begin to gather knowledge and information, because of course when we went through this fiscal audit and we went through this, all of us had to work together to gather the knowledge to navigate through that, find the right attorney, get the thing taken care of. Now we know an awful lot about fiscal law. We know about fiduciary law. We know how to do a lot of things we didn't know how to do before, and that makes it possible for us to open these potentials up to all of you and to many other people. Because now we have an attorney who is ready, willing, and able to help us to do that. So if we have made our reality such that it is so that we have this hugely expanded view of the world, these piles of information that come into us all the time because we're always researching, always reading. And it has changed us individually and collectively. And it creates a certain environment for us individually and collectively. And it makes it possible for us to bring you into this environment, to feel it and to enjoy it, because it really is a marvelous experience. I mean, it is for us on a day-to-day basis. Y'all are here for, a short period of time. You could do it all the time if you wanted to, and if you made the decisions. But notice these decisions I'm talking about that are made with information that we gather. It's not always easy to gather the information. It's not always easy to apply it, because sometimes you have to make hard decisions. And I'll give you an example. Wayne Dwyer did a little talk once, and I listened to it, about his, he's kind of like a new agey type who talks about how you can become successful and get over your, erroneous zones or something. I don't even remember the titles of all his books, but he talks about how he became a success. And he's, of course, selling a program to make other people successful in life in one way or another. And the funny thing is that when he wrote his book, he was not a success until he did certain things that are not quite clearly explicated in the book. What he did was, he got the book, he used all his money, got the book published, loaded all these boxes of books in the back of his station wagon, and started driving across country in the U.S. In every city he'd come to, he would contact all the radio stations in the city, and he would sell himself, basically, to get an interview on the radio to sell his book. So he did this across the whole United States with this, and he would go to bookstores. As soon as he'd have the interview on the radio, the night before, he would go to the bookstores in the town and say, I just happen to have the books. Would you like some copies? Because by this time, people are calling the bookstore asking, do you have copies of this book? Now, you see, he didn't become a success by thinking about it or wishful thinking. What he was doing was, it was a very crafty plan. That was really cunning. You go, you got the books, you create the excitement with the radio interview. And obviously he got told no a lot, but after he got told yes a few times, small radio station, they didn't have anything going on. Oh yeah, we'll talk to you. Create the demand for your product. Go to the places that sell the product, sell it to them, and then go to the next town and repeat, add water, rinse and repeat, or whatever, or mix and repeat. So this is how he did it. And he knew what he was doing. He had information. And he made decisions, and it was hard work, because I bet sleeping in his car, which he said he did, he was sleeping in his car. He didn't have much money after he paid to have his book printed. It was hard work. And he had to put himself out there. And everything we do is hard work. We have to put ourselves out there. I am out there all the time, a lightning rod, getting attacked by everything and everybody, so that I can protect all the people who are interested in our work. To give them the right to have access to it. Because if I wasn't taking that flack, we would have disappeared a long time ago if I hadn't made that choice. So when you make choices, and there are many other choices as I just described to you that I had to make, some of them were very hard, some of them were very painful. I mean, some of them amounted to me, getting in the station wagon with everything I owned, metaphorically speaking, and driving across country. So, now, if there were groups doing this, and those groups were creating small enclaves of the world you dream of. Dreaming of a better world, a world where people treat each other nicely, a world where people are honest and tell the truth, a world where people help one another, a world where people understand one another, where people are engaged in a project and they're joyful about it, they do something productive, they do something creative, they work together, kind of like a team, and one of them says, "Oh, I see you're having trouble there, let me help you," and the other one says, "You look a little tired, you go rest, I'll take over," or the other one says, "I'll cook dinner tonight because you did such and such today." A life like that, with people like that, it's kind of like a dream for most people, even in their personal relationships. And having children grow up and learn to live that way, learn how to help each other and how to do teamwork, because there's so many things that people want to do that they can't really do because they're alone, or they're just alone as a couple, or they're alone as a couple with a couple of children. I mean, what if you wanted to do a work that serves humanity? Say you have a dream of a soup kitchen. You want to make a soup kitchen, but you have to spend all your time working at your job doing data entry all day long, and your husband works all day long at his job in the post office, say, and you both come home and you read the paper and you think, somebody needs, I'm such a cook and people need this nutrition, I want a soup kitchen, how am I going to do it? And you don't have enough of your own money that you scrimp and save to open your soup. What I'm saying is you're somebody who wants to really do something for others. If you're not somebody who wants to do that, then you're watching the wrong video. You're listening to the wrong talk, because, I don't really have much to say to you. But if you really don't like the way the world is and you really do want to do something about it, there is a way to do it. But you have to do it as a group, because if there is the very probable, hypothetical, fourth density reality and fourth density beings who have access to really fantastic arrays of knowledge, because if fourth density is higher than, the astral plane that surrounds this planet, and my friend could see what was going on in Port Arthur, Tasmania, and talk to me at the same time, can you imagine what fourth density awareness must be like? And that's the kind of thing we're shooting for as a group. Because none of us individually, as a couple, even as 3 or 4 friends who get together, can equal that kind of awareness. Could any of us, if 4 of us sit together and we're just the best of friends and we just have a great time together, and we sit there and say, I want to know what's going on in Port Arthur, Tasmania right now. Let's sit here and think really hard. Maybe yes, maybe no. I mean, remote viewing is kind of like that, but would you get somebody saying, "Oh, don't shoot the little girl"? You would just get some images, you draw some kind of picture, say, "Oh, it's a little something violent there. I feel hate, I hear loud noises, something, projectiles." And that's your remote viewing synopsis of the situation, but nothing like, don't shoot the little girl. So if that's astral awareness, what must fourth density awareness be like? And do we actually honestly think that we can outthink them unless we work as a group and pool our resources, pool our mental powers, pool our emotional powers, our mental blocking, all of those kinds of things? And that is, in essence, kind of what, because, they've been throwing everything at us for how many years now? And the more people we acquired and the more aware we became and the more solid we became as a group and the more committed to each other we became, the less able they were to do anything, and the more we attracted the right people to help us to navigate through these things. So it's not like we are a fourth density being as a group necessarily, but we are actually growing because now we have, like I said, we have a couple of really cool lawyers who really like what we do. And they are really looking to help us with, and the addition of their knowledge and awareness to our pool of knowledge and awareness is just absolutely staggering because, a good lawyer who is a decent human being, and believe me, ours are, is a really smart person. They know law. So the point is, you can make choices. You can make decisions. You can start looking at things a certain way. And I'm not going to promise anybody anything. I don't swear by it. But I think it's highly probable that we'd end up as groups, if we increased our numbers, we could move to this reality here. Obviously, when you move to a different reality, the past and future changes, just like it does in this. This one doesn't show the past so much changing as it shows the alternate realities fading away. But if you're dealing with, these infinite potentials like this, it's not just the future that changes. The past also changes too, in certain respects. And how would it appear? And we were talking about this last night. How would it feel if you had that kind of a transition to another reality where everything changed? Would you forget about the reality that we were in a while ago, where the earth was about to destroy itself because of all the garbage in the ocean, the disparity between rich and poor, this, that, or the other thing? Or would it seem more natural? Would it be like, there were a few little spotty overhead commentary explosions. They just happened to, vaporize nuclear power plants and garbage piles in the ocean, or some of the really nasty things. There were some storms and tornadoes and earthquakes and some land turned over, and different things happened, but we're still here. Most of the people that liked that world and were not willing to make any choices or decisions to do anything about it, they got the plague and they're all dead now, and here we are on this new world, 40 days and 40 nights, metaphorically speaking, has gone by, and there's a rainbow in the sky. Noah made a decision. He built an ark. He watched the signs of the times. On a certain day, he said, it's time to go in the ark. And I'm just using this as a metaphor for making decisions about, how you live your life. If you're dreaming of a better world, in a sense, you have to create it now. But how you create it is not the way that is generally told to people. You don't just sit there and think it into being. Sometimes it takes hard work. It takes giving up certain things and taking on board certain other things. Living in a community is a very different thing from having, from the way we're told we're supposed to live. It's actually a more ancient and honorable way to live than what is propagated on us for the benefit of pathological individuals in power, or psychopaths in particular, that you must get married, you must buy your own home, you must have your car, you must have your vacation, you must work at this regular job, you must do this, this, and this, and you must save up all your money so you can have a retirement, and you must, of course, if you're on the pathological side of it, that's to feed their reality. Their reality is amass large amounts of stuff and power so you can leave it to your psychopathic kids or perpetuate this system with other psychopaths, ad infinitum. So so they promote this, get it for yourself, this consumerism, this mine thing. In a community, it's not mine. It's everybody's. Decisions are made by everybody. They all contribute. Information is brought in by everybody. And usually it's to, sometimes you have to do things that you're not accustomed to doing. For me, I'm not the greatest mathematician, but I actually have to do tax returns. Thank God for calculators. And I had to learn how to read and interpret tax instruction booklets. And sometimes I had to read even more than the instruction booklet, but rulings and so forth. So sometimes you have to do things that are a little bit out of your area of competency, which you do simply because you're the one that's capable of doing it. And sometimes it's just a matter of competency. Everybody has their own area, so they all contribute according to that, and everything works. But nobody's getting wealthy. Nobody is creating a nest egg. Nobody is putting something aside unless they have some little side thing that they're doing, which is, of course, entirely acceptable as long as they consult with their community about it. Is it okay if I go out to work for 6 hours a day and y'all can cover for me so I can make money to put in the bank for myself? You think your group's going to like that? I'm going to let y'all do all the other work around the house, while I go out and make money for myself. You're not getting any of it. You cover for me. Think that would work?
Yeah. When you talked about changing your past, like your past in Florida, you still experienced it, but it's changed. How does that?
Your interpretation of it, your understanding of it, because if I still was there, suppose I had stayed in that relationship and within a couple of years I ended up in the hospital, which is where I was going, and I was dying, and I looked back on my past, and all I would be able to see was my past being, one long series of, awful, miserable things that led to the next thing and the next miserable thing and and now I'm dying. It was all meaningless. However, when you take those experiences and you extract the lesson, the information from them, you decode what happened to you. Because everything carries information. And a miserable situation carries a lot of information. And one of the things that I like to say about myself is I'm a good learner. I don't usually make the same mistake twice, because if I make a mistake and it makes me feel really bad, or I suffer, or somebody else suffers for it, I sit there and I think about it, what message does that carry to me? Don't do thus and so again. And how do you know when thus and so is coming up? Well, remember, and you examine everything that happened about it, and you read the signs. So that's how your past changes, because in a sense it becomes meaningful. So anyway, it's all about decisions. It's about when you make those decisions, it's about the work to get the information that you need to make the decisions, estimate the probabilities accurately, then make the decision, then you have to put it into effect. If you do, this may be the reality we end up on. I'm heading that way. I hope. I'd sure like to have a lot of people there with me. How about you? No? Okay, so I think that's all I'm going to say today. And let's go and take a photograph.